How's it going, people? That time of week again. This week's book, How Fascism Works, by Jason Stanley, with the subtitle The Politics of Us and Them. And this was another one, like last week's book, where we went through the New Poverty by Stephen Armstrong. This was another one where I had to get out my highlighter and start highlighting certain bits and parts all throughout the book. Now, this Jason Stanley is an American academic. I didn't actually know that when I bought the book. I just assumed he was English. My own racism coming into play, I think, there. But I'll read you the back inside cover, which details the author. Jason Stanley is a Jacob Urowski Professor of Philosophy at Yale University. Before coming to Yale in 2013, he was Distinguished Professor in the Department of Philosophy at Rutgers University. Stanley is the author of Know-How, Languages in Context, Knowledge and Practical Interests, which won the American Philosophical Association Book Prize, and How Propaganda Works, which won the Prose Award for Philosophy from the Association of American Publishers. He is a frequent contributor to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Review, and the Chronicle of Higher Education, among other publications. Stanley lives in New Haven, Connecticut with his family. So he basically details historically how history has worked, how fascism has worked throughout history, and ideologically how fascism operates as well. And he draws many contemporary examples, including, of course, Hitler, the archetype of a fascist, and the archetype of a fascist regime, Nazi Germany. And he compares it to many modern day political decisions and politicians and stuff as well. So I'll read you some of the highlighted parts that I thought were quite interesting early on in the book. So I'll start from the beginning. I won't really read you obviously all of this. Not enough time in the world to do that. But right, the most telling symptom of politics, fascist politics, is division. It aims to separate population into us and them. That's the most basic thing that you can get from fascism if you study it. It also details how fascists play on divisions of race, gender, of sexuality, even ability. Later on in the book, he'll detail how the Nazis advocated sterilisation of disabled people because they didn't consider disabled people to be worth anything. They believed in the value of work and hard work. That's why I Beat Marked Free, which is the last chapter of this book, the title of the last chapter of this book, was above the Auschwitz and other work camps, because it means work sets you free. And they believed that inferior races, in this case the Jews, could purify themselves through hard work because they were naturally lazy. And this man, Jason Stanley, details how that attitude, that rhetoric, plays even in modern day politics, even with Donald Trump, for instance, who many people regard to be a quasi-fascist, even in the way that he details Mexicans and Muslims as naturally lazy, criminals, drug dealers, rapists. It details, there's a chapter in here called Sexual Anxiety, which details how, chapter 8, which details how fascists play on the traditional role of the patriarchy, of the man in the family being the leader, being the man in charge, being the person who protects the family, and how false claims and false stats of rape by refugees in a modern day example, or by Jews or by black people historically, have been used to manipulate people into following fascist politics. Because these people, fascists, will come along and say they're naturally inclined, black people, Jews, refugees, are somehow naturally inclined or intrinsically built to rape and slaughter and generally be barbarians towards especially women and children. And he details that quite vividly, how fascism manipulates that difference. And he'll detail, as I said earlier, about how fascism will manipulate race differences by pretending that one race is naturally inclined or intrinsically inclined to be lazy or to be a criminal or to be etc., etc., something negative. And he details the difference in attitudes as well towards people, towards different groups of people when they commit the same act. So he says, for instance, if my white friend Johnny steals a chocolate bar, you will speak about it more abstractly, like Johnny took a chocolate bar. You wouldn't say Johnny is a criminal, Johnny is a thief, even though by very virtue of facts, he is a thief. But if a black boy, if Jamal, for instance, or Jerome, took a chocolate bar from a store without paying, you would say Jerome is a thief. And I think that was very, very interesting. So some more parts that I've actually highlighted. I'll go towards the end of the book this time. As a prelude to ethnic cleansing or genocide, governments will artificially create the conditions inside the state that seem to legitimise the subsequent brutal treatment of the population. This was very, very, very interesting. And this is in the final chapter of the book, I'll Beat 'Em Up 3, which details how work ethic and the value of work is very, very important to fascists. And that chapter there was detailing how, that section there, detailing how fascists and fascist politicians will actually perpetuate the very stereotypes that they claim to abhor. So if they say Muslims are greedy, Muslims are coming on state benefits, they want benefits, they want this, they want that, they will actually let me get my tongue together. They will actually perpetuate the circumstances in which that occurs. So if they say, for instance, you know, black people are criminals, they will take black people, they will incarcerate them on petty crimes, petty crimes. Say, for instance, jaywalking or parking fines or whatever. They will incarcerate them. And of course, as you know, once you've been incarcerated, you stand a much less chance of actually getting a job when you come out. Employers will be much less likely to employ you. And he quotes several studies in this one where he actually says that they took different examples and presented them to a test group, and they said, would you employ this man, would you employ this man? And in both circumstances they changed it to say this man is guilty of armed robbery or this man has no criminal record. And they actually concluded that even in the case where the black male has no criminal record, he is statistically less likely to get a job. So even before incarceration, these people are less likely to find employment. But after incarceration, that drops dramatically even more so. So they take that, they incarcerate these black people on drug charges or, you know, minor marijuana, carrying marijuana or jaywalking or any petty crime that they can find, and incarcerate, and they give this boy or give this man or whoever it is a criminal record, and then thus create the situation where it's harder for this person to find work based on a stupid conviction that wasn't serious, wasn't violent, wasn't, you know, federal or anything, but it's harder for them to find work now. So what happens when you can't find work? How do you support your family? Well, what's one of the alternative ways of supporting your family and supporting yourself? Crime, of course. So they actually perpetuate a lot of these myths that they actually spread about certain groups being more predisposed or more pre-inclined to certain acts, and that was very, very interesting. This was actually quite an expensive book. It was about £20 from my local Waterstones, and I wasn't sure why at the time. I normally don't spend that much money on a book, but I thought I've got to have this book. I picked it up. £20 in Waterstones. It really is worth the money, I think. I wasn't sure if I was going to read this and find anything new, anything different, anything worth reading, but it really was worth a read. It really, really puts into context some of the actions of the Western governments, particularly today in modern day eras. And he even details the actions of Orban and other Eastern European governments which are fascistic in nature, and the spread of fascism across Eastern Europe and even Western Europe in France and stuff. So go ahead and pick that up. That was a very, very interesting read. How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley, The Politics of Us and Them. And that's it. I'll see you during the week if I do any videos, and I'll see you next week for next week's book review.